The desperate signal. The colony of Vayara was burning. Flames crawled across the horizon, black smoke rising into the stars. Families ran through broken streets, clutching children, dragging the wounded, searching for a place to hide. But there was no safe place left. The enemy was everywhere. The Croth Empire had come without warning. Their ships had entered orbit 2 days ago, dark and silent, like hunters circling prey. Then the fire fell. Energy beams tore through cities, turning towers into dust. Ground troops followed, tall armored beasts with glowing blades. Wherever they went, nothing lived for long. The Vayrans had no army, no fleets, no chance. They were farmers, workers, scientists, never soldiers. The Galactic Council had promised protection, but no ships came. When the Vayrans begged for help, the Council only gave silence. Inside the last working bunker, a young technician named Sarai slammed her trembling hands against the console. Sparks jumped from broken wires, but she didn't stop. Her face was streaked with ash. Her voice hoarse from smoke. "We can't hold much longer," shouted Captain Drawl, one of the last guards left alive. His armor was cracked, blood dripping down his arm. "Send the signal again." "I'm trying," Sarai cried. She hit the panel again, forcing power into the failing transmitter. Lights flickered weakly. A burst of static filled the bunker, then cleared. Her heart pounded. The message was short. It had to be. The power wouldn't last. "This is Vayara. Colony under attack. We need help. Please, anyone." The signal burst into the void, across systems, through the endless dark. For a moment, Sarai closed her eyes and prayed. She didn't care who heard it. Pirate, council, stranger, it didn't matter. Someone had to answer. Outside, the ground shook as another blast hit the surface. The walls cracked, dust raining from the ceiling. The bunker groaned under the weight. Drall helped Sarai to her feet. His eyes were tired, but steady. "Even if no one comes," he said, "at least we tried." Sarai wanted to scream at him. She wanted to say that trying wasn't enough, that her family was gone, that the colony was dying, that hope itself was vanishing. But the words never came. She only clutched the console, staring at the dim light that showed the signal had gone through. Far beyond Vayara, in the deep corridors of the Galactic Council, diplomats received the transmission. They listened in silence, their jeweled robes glowing under white lights. One counselor snorted. "Another dead colony. Why waste resources?" "They are not strategically important," said another. "Let the Croth take them." The chamber agreed. No fleets would be moved. No soldiers would be sent. The Vayrans were already lost. The signal should have died there, buried in files, erased by politics. But signals do not choose where they travel. They ride the stars, reaching places even the Council avoids. And so, hours later, in a hidden listening post orbiting Earth, the message played again. "This is Vayara. Colony under attack. We need help. Please, anyone." The room was quiet. As the technicians looked at each other, some had heard similar signals before. They usually ignored them. Earth had its own problems. But something in this voice, the desperation, the raw terror made the silence heavy. The officer in charge, Commander Hall, leaned forward. His eyes were sharp, his jaw tight. He listened to the broken words twice, then a third time. Finally, he whispered, "Send it to High Command." No one argued. No one dared. Hours later, in the underground war halls of Earth, the message echoed once more. Generals and admirals stood in the dark, listening without expression. The words ended. The room stayed silent. At last, a single order was given. Just one. No debate. No hesitation. Prepare the fleet. The signal from a dying colony, had reached the most feared world in the galaxy. And the Deathworlders had heard it. Asterisk, the silent decision Earth, did not answer with words. When the SOS reached the war halls beneath the surface, there were no speeches, no debates, no arguments. The counselors of other species always filled there. Chambers with noise hours of talking, endless excuses. Humanity was different. The message ended. The silence lingered. Admiral Reeve stood in the center of the war table, his uniform sharp, his face as hard as steel. Around him, the senior officers waited, their eyes locked on him. He did not ask for votes. He did not ask for opinions. He only spoke one sentence: "We move." A quiet ripple passed through the room. Heads nodded. Not one officer questioned him. Not one asked, "Why save them?" The answer was already in their bones. Orders spread across Earth like fire through dry grass. No parades, no announcements, no public speeches. Instead, shadows moved, doors opened, and ancient machines awoke. In orbit above the planet, docks, the size of mountains, lit up with activity. Workers ran across steel bridges, guiding massive ammunition crates into the bellies of starships. Engines roared to life, trembling against restraints. The Deathworld fleet was not built for beauty. Its ships were scarred, ugly, and terrifying. Some carried blackened armor still burned from wars long forgotten. Others were new, sharp-edged, their hulls gleaming under floodlights. But every vessel carried the same weight, a silence that promised fire. On the ground, families saw the movement. Children watched in awe as entire valleys rumbled with the awakening of armored divisions. Rows of soldiers marched quietly, their faces expressionless, their weapons gleaming in the morning sun, but no one cheered. Humanity did not treat war as glory. For them, it was survival. It was instinct. It was duty. In a dim room far from the docks, a young intelligence officer named Kira tapped at her console. She had replayed the Vayara signal 12 times. Each time, her throat tightened at the voice of the girl, begging through static. Superior, Colonel Marn, stood behind her. "Are we sure about this?" he asked quietly. "This isn't our fight." Kira turned in her chair, her eyes cold. "It wasn't our fight when they left us to die centuries ago. But we survived. And now—" She touched the console again, the voice of Sarai echoing once more. "We need help. Please, anyone. Now we answer." Marn said nothing. He only nodded. The silence of agreement. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the other species began to notice. In the halls of the Galactic Council, whispers spread like shadows. Couriers brought reports: unusual movement in Sol System, fleets preparing, weapons loaded. Counselor Ralph, a tall being with crystal skin, slammed a clawed hand on the table. "They are moving again," he hissed. "The Deathworlders are preparing their ships." Another counselor's voice trembled. "For what? For war? Who have they chosen to destroy?" But no one knew. Humanity did not explain their reasons. They never had. And that was what frightened the galaxy most. Back on Earth, Admiral Reeve stood on the bridge of the Iron Requiem, one of the oldest battleships still in service. The ship's walls were scarred with black burns, each mark a reminder of battles. Survived. He looked out at the gathering fleet, hundreds of ships, aligning into silent formation. "Sir," his second-in-command said. "Final confirmation? Should I send the order?" Reeve's voice was low, calm, and final. "Tell them, burn for Vayara." The fleet did not roar as it launched. There was no music, no cheering, no bright banners. Engines lit up one by one, casting cold blue fire into the dark. The ships slipped from orbit, vanishing into the black like wolves into the forest. On Earth, the skies grew quiet again. To the untrained eye, nothing had happened. But to those who knew, the silence was deafening. The Deathworlders were moving, and once they moved, there was no turning them back. In her ruined bunker, Sarai coughed blood into her hand as the walls shook from another bombardment. Captain Drawl still stood guard, his blade sparking with every clash against enemy steel. Did anyone hear us? Sarai whispered. Drall did not know. But far above, across the stars, an entire fleet was already on the way. A fleet the galaxy feared. A fleet that answered only in fire. Asterisk. The first burn, the sky above Vayara was a graveyard. Enemy warships filled the heavens like black teeth. Their engines glowed red, their cannons burned bright, and every hour they rained death on the ground below. Cities were gone. The forests that once stretched for miles now burned as ash. On the surface, survivors huddled in broken shelters, waiting for the final strike. The Kroth Empire always ended invasions the same way: total cleansing. No survivors. No witnesses. Inside the bunker, Sarai pressed her forehead to the console, tears streaking through the soot on her face. The power was almost gone. The air smelled of fire and blood. Captain Drawl stood near the entrance, his armor cracked, his sword dull from endless use. "This is it," he muttered. "We've held as long as we can." But then the ground trembled, not from another bombardment, but from something else. The noise was different, lower, deeper, like thunder rolling through stone. Drawl frowned. Sarai lifted her head, confused. Above the burning world. The stars changed. At first, it was just a shadow, a massive shape sliding from the void. Then another, then a dozen more. The Kroth fleet adjusted their formations, sensors blinking red. In confusion, the shadows became ships. Colossal, armored, scarred ships. They moved with cold precision, no wasted motion, no hesitation. A whisper spread through every Kroth vessel. Deathworlders. On the bridge of the Kroth flagship, Warlord Kor leaned forward in his iron chair. His voice was sharp, filled with disbelief. Humans? Here? His second-in-command hissed. Impossible. They have no reason. Then explain their fleet. Kor's eyes narrowed. On his screens, the Deathworld armada spread like storm clouds, blocking the light of the system's star. On the ground, survivors stumbled from bunkers and ruins, their eyes wide as the sky filled with alien steel. At first, they feared it was more enemies. But then the first human transmission cut through the static, deep and cold. "This is the Deathworld fleet. Stay down. We will handle this." Sarai's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed Drawl's arm. "Someone came," she whispered. They really came. The Kroth moved first. Arrogant, confident, they launched their opening strike. 50 warships broke formation, charging the human line with beams blazing. Their energy cannons split the black, roaring toward the newcomers. For a heartbeat, it looked as if the humans would be swallowed. The Kroth laughed. Then the humans fired. The first salvo from the Iron Requiem cut the silence like a scream. Railguns spat molten rounds at impossible speed, each slug ripping through space and tearing holes in Kroth armor. Missiles streaked like falling stars, chasing enemy ships with ruthless precision. One by one, Kroth warships bloomed into fireballs. Their shields collapsed, their hulls snapped. Crews were incinerated before they could even scream. The survivors on Vayara fell to their knees, staring as the impossible happened. The Kroth invincible conquerors, feared by every world, were being torn apart like paper. Admiral Reeves stood on the bridge of the Iron Requiem. His face was calm, his voice steady as he gave orders. Squadron Alpha cut through their flank. Beta Squadron hold position and fire at will. Do not waste shots. There was no triumph in his tone, no pride, just cold precision. Humanity did not fight for glory. They fought to end wars as fast as possible. And when they fought, the galaxy burned. On the Croft flagship, panic spread. "They are cutting us down," one officer shouted. "Our armor useless against them." Warlord Kor slammed his fist against the armrest, fury mixing with fear. "They are only human. They bleed like any other. Fight harder." But his words were hollow. His crew saw the truth on their screens. No matter how hard they fired, the Deathworlders' ships held. Their armor was scarred, but unbroken. Their guns relentless. Back in the bunker, Sarai's hands trembled as she listened to the distant thunder above. The walls shook not from enemy bombardments, but from human weapons tearing through the sky. Drell finally let out a laugh, broken and sharp. "By the stars, they're real. The stories were true." "What stories?" Sarai asked. Drall's smile was grim. "That if the humans come, they don't stop until the fire has nothing left to burn." As the first Croth warships exploded, in orbit, the galaxy changed. The council chambers lit up with warning signals. Feeds of the battle spread to every corner of civilized space. Species that had dismissed humanity as reckless, primitive savages now watched in silence. And across countless worlds, one thought echoed like a heartbeat. The Deathworlders have moved again. Asterisk. Fire across the stars, the battlefield above Vayara, turned into a storm of light and fire. The Croth had expected an easy victory. They had conquered dozens of worlds, burned colonies into dust, and slaughtered armies without effort. But against the humans, their power meant nothing. The Deathworld. Fleet moved like a machine of war. Every ship in perfect position, every weapon strike precise. There was no waste, no hesitation, no mercy. On the bridge of the Iron Requiem, Admiral Reeves' voice remained calm. "Target the lead cruiser. Fire in sequence." The command traveled instantly. 3 destroyers swung into formation. Railguns cracked, hurling steel slugs faster than sound. They pierced the Croth cruiser's shields as if they were glass, slamming through the hull and out the other side. The enemy vessel broke apart in silence, its wreckage glowing as it tumbled into the void. "Next," Reeves said. His officers obeyed. Below, on the ruined colony, the survivors watched the sky. The heavens themselves looked alive, flashes of blue railgun fire, trails of white missiles, explosions blooming like suns. Sarai pressed her face against a broken window, eyes wide. For the first time in days, she felt her chest fill with something. She thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Drall stood beside her, his battered sword still in hand, though there was no enemy left near them. He muttered under his breath, half to himself, half in awe. They fight like they were born in fire. The Croth tried to fight back. They regrouped, forming lines, unleashing full barrages. Energy beams cut across space, slamming into human shields. Entire Deathworld ships shuddered under the hits. Some hulls cracked. Some armor peeled away, but the humans never stopped. Damaged ships shifted back while fresh ones moved forward. Every casualty was answered with 3 Croth vessels destroyed. On the Croth flagship, Warlord Kor's fury boiled into fear. "They don't retreat," he shouted. "They don't break formation. Who fights like this?" His second in command hissed, "They're monsters." "No," Kor whispered, staring at the burning battlefield. "They're human." The galaxy watched too. Across countless worlds, counselors, soldiers, and civilians leaned closer to glowing feeds, unable to look away. The Deathworlders were showing their true face. Some species whispered in awe. Others whispered in fear. But all of them felt the same cold truth. If this was the strength of a fleet answering a call for help, then what would happen if humanity ever chose to wage a full war? The Croth sent their dreadnoughts next. Massive ships, each the size of a city, bristling with heavy cannons. They had crushed rebellions, wiped out whole systems, and were considered invincible. Admiral Reeve watched them approach, his expression unchanged. Bring the hammers online. Deep inside the Deathworld ships, hidden weapons awoke. Gigantic mass drivers, dormant for years, hummed with power. They were not elegant. They were not clean. They were brutal. The first hammer fired. A solid tungsten rod, the length of a building, tore through space, glowing red from speed. It smashed into a dreadnought's core. The enemy ship split in half. One strike. One kill. The Vayrans below gasped as the explosion painted the sky red. Sarai's hands shook as she whispered, "They're saving us." Drawl shook his head. "No, this isn't saving. This is vengeance." Back in orbit, Admiral Reeve gave another command, his tone as cold as ice. "Keep firing. Do not let a single ship leave this system." The Deathworlders obeyed. Hours passed, though it felt like only minutes. One by one, Croth vessels died. Fire and debris filled the heavens. Their proud fleet, once a terror to the galaxy, became nothing but wreckage drifting in silence. Finally, only the flagship remained. Warlord Kor's face twisted with rage and fear as the iron requiem locked onto him. He roared across the comms. "Humans, you think you are saviors? You are beasts. You are monsters." Admiral Reeve's reply was calm, sharp, and final. "Then remember the monster that burned you." The iron requiem fired. The Croth flagship exploded into a second sun. Silence fell across the system. The battle was over. The humans did not cheer. They did not gloat. Their ships held formation, weapons still armed, engines still burning. They waited, watching, like predators making sure their prey was truly dead. On the ground, Sarai sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since the attack began, she allowed herself to breathe. Above her, the Deathworlders, hung in the sky like a wall of fire. Asterisk. The turning tide the battlefield was quiet, too quiet. The Croth fleet was shattered, their wreckage drifting like broken bones across the stars. Vayara's survivors dared to believe it was over. Sarai even smiled through her tears, whispering, "We're saved." But Captain Drawl's face stayed grim. His soldier's eyes scanned the burning sky. He knew better. Wars were never over until the last enemy drew their final breath. And he was right. From the shadows of the system's second moon, shapes began to stir. Huge shapes. The ground shook as Vayara's sensors lit up again. Survivors watched the skies in horror as 3 Croth war dreadnoughts emerged. Each ship was a floating fortress, bristling with cannons large enough to vaporize cities in one shot. Their armored hulls gleamed black and red, forged from metals stolen across a dozen worlds. Even broken and bleeding, the Croth Empire would not leave quietly. They had come to finish this. On the bridge of the Iron Requiem, alarm screamed. Admiral Reeve narrowed his eyes, staring at the colossal warships. "They've been hiding them." His second-in-command muttered. "Waiting until we bled." Reeve's voice was calm, unshaken. "They've miscalculated. Humans don't bleed out, we fight harder." He raised a hand. "All ships brace. Target dreadnoughts." The battle reignited. The Croth dreadnoughts opened fire first. Blazing beams of crimson energy tore through the void. One shot ripped a human frigate in half. Another melted the armor of a destroyer until it exploded into burning fragments. The survivors on the ground cried out as the heavens shook again. "Will they lose?" Sarai whispered, clutching Drawls arm. Drawl's voice was low, steady. "Watch closely. Deathworlders don't know how to lose." The humans answered. Swarms of missiles streaked toward the dreadnoughts. Railgun rounds hammered their shields, and coordinated strikes burned into their flanks. But the enemy's armor held. One dreadnought kept moving forward, cannons blazing, forcing the humans back. Another fired directly at the Iron Requiem, its shields shuddering under the colossal strike. For the first time, the human fleet looked strained. Inside the Iron Requiem, officers shouted reports, ships down, hull breaches, casualties rising. But Admiral Reeves stood silent, his hand gripping the edge of the console. His eyes did not waver. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the bridge like thunder. "Bring me the Leviathan Protocol." The crew froze. The words were old, rarely spoken, but every officer knew what it meant. A single human destroyer, the Spear of Dawn, broke formation. Its engines flared, burning brighter than suns. It moved straight toward the nearest Croth dreadnought. On its bridge, Captain Rana adjusted her straps, her face set with grim determination. She knew what she was about to do. Her crew knew too. None of them hesitated. The Croth laughed as this tiny destroyer approached their massive ship. "Pathetic," one growled. Then the Spear of Dawn ignited its final drive. The ship became a blazing spear of light, accelerating far beyond safe limits. It slammed into the dreadnought's core. Explosion shook the system. The dreadnought split apart, torn in half by the force of the collision. Both ships vanished into fire. Gasps echoed across Vyara. Sarai clapped her hands over her mouth, eyes wide. They rammed it," she whispered. Drall nodded slowly. His voice was heavy. "To humans, survival means sacrifice. And when they sacrifice, they take their enemies with them." But the fight was not over. 2 dreadnoughts remained, their fury unmatched. They fired again and again, tearing through human lines. Ships were burning. Lives were lost. Yet the Deathworlders pressed forward. Damaged ships refused to retreat. Crews kept firing until the last breath. Admiral Reeves' command was sharp. "Alpha Wing, flank them. Beta Wing, draw their fire." His officers obeyed without question, even as death closed in. One dreadnought's shields finally cracked under the relentless barrage. Human warships poured every weapon into its exposed hull, drilling holes until the giant exploded in a storm of flame. Only one remained. The last Croth warship, its cannons still burning, its rage still alive. On the ground, Sarai clutched Draw's arm tighter. "Please," she whispered to no one. "Please win." Of her, the final clash raged. Human ships broke, bled, and still fought. The dreadnought pushed forward, a mountain of steel refusing to fall. And then the Iron Requiem itself turned directly. Toward it. Admiral Reeves' voice was calm as ever. "All ships clear my path." The ancient battleship surged ahead, its engines roaring. Every remaining gun on its hull lit up, pouring fire into the dreadnought's heart. 2 titans faced each other, locked in a duel of fire and will. On the galaxy's feeds, billions watched in silence. Some trembled, some cheered, but all of them understood one thing. The Deathworlders would rather burn themselves to ashes than allow their enemies to stand victorious. The message sent the battlefield was reduced to chaos. Flaming wreckage floated across the stars, broken hulls spinning in silence. The last Croth dreadnought towered over the battlefield, still firing, still refusing to die. Its cannons blazed with fury, tearing into human ships that circled it like wolves. The Iron Requiem led the charge. Admiral Reeves stood tall on the bridge, watching the massive enemy vessel fill his screen. His officers shouted report shields. Down to half, hull damage critical, casualties mounting. But his expression never changed. His voice stayed calm. "Keep firing. Push forward." The human fleet obeyed. Railguns cracked. Missiles streaked. Plasma cannons roared. Strike after strike hammered into the dreadnought's armor, peeling it away piece by piece. But still the giant advanced. On the ground below, Sarai and Drawl clung to each other as the sky flared again and again. Each explosion painted the heavens red. Each flash lit up their faces with hope and terror. Will they win? Sarai whispered. Drawl's voice was low. They're Deathworlders. Winning is not a choice, it's survival. The dreadnought retaliated with fury. One beam cut through a human cruiser, splitting it clean in half. Another barrage crippled a destroyer, sending it spiraling into the void. Human lives were lost in fire, but the fleet pressed closer, never retreating. Then the moment came. The Iron Requiem's forward batteries fired in perfect sequence. Tungsten slugs drilled through the dreadnought's final shield, tearing into its exposed core. The ship shuddered, metal screaming, fire bursting from its wounds. Admiral Reeve raised his hand. His voice was soft, almost a whisper. End it. A coordinated strike followed. Hundreds of guns fired at once. Missiles streaked from every angle. The dreadnought vanished in a storm of fire so bright it blinded the skies. When the light faded, there was nothing left. The Kroth fleet was gone. Silence. On the surface of Vayara. Survivors fell to their knees, sobbing in relief. Sarai wept into her hands, whispering thank yous to the stars. Captain Drawl exhaled slowly, his tired eyes watching. The Deathworld fleet hanging in orbit like silent guardians. But the humans did not celebrate. No cheers. No songs. No shouts of victory. Their ships held formation, weapons still armed, as if ready to fight again at a moment's notice. To them, this was not triumph, it was duty. Inside the Galactic Council chambers, chaos erupted. Feeds from the battle played across every screen. Billions across the galaxy had witnessed the Deathworlders' return. Some counselors trembled in fear. Others argued in panic. They've destroyed an entire Kroth fleet, shouted one. They did it as if it were nothing. Counselor Relf slammed his crystal hand against the table. His voice cracked with terror. And this was not even their full strength. This was only a response. Silence followed. Every counselor knew what that meant. If humanity ever truly declared war, no empire would survive. Back aboard the Iron Requiem, Admiral Reeve stood at the central console. The enemy was gone. The battle was won. But he knew the galaxy was listening. Patch me into the open channels, he ordered. The comms officer hesitated. Sir, that will reach everyone. Reeve's cold eyes met hers. That's the point, the officer obeyed. A click echoed through the bridge. Now, every listening post, every spy satellite, every council chamber could hear the Deathworlders. Reeve leaned forward, his voice sharp, steady, and without mercy. This is the Deathworld fleet. To those who sent the signal, your people are safe. To those who ignored it, remember this day. When you call for help, we come. But if you bring fire to our door, he paused, his words falling like blades, we will burn you down. The message spread like wildfire across the galaxy. People froze as the words echoed through their speakers. Some whispered in awe, others trembled in fear. But none could ignore it. On Vayara, Sarai heard the transmission through the broken console in the bunker. Her hands shook as tears rolled down her cheeks. They saved us, she whispered. Drawl's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving the sky. No, they saved more than us. They sent a warning to everyone. In the aftermath, the Deathworld fleet did not stay. They did not ask for thanks. They did not demand tribute. Slowly, silently, their engines lit up once more. The great ships turned, slipping back into the void, leaving only fire and wreckage behind. The survivors of Vayara watched them go, knowing they had seen something the galaxy would never forget. Fire and silence. The fire was gone, but its memory remained. Above Vayara, the stars were littered with wreckage. Broken Croft warships drifted in silence, their shattered hulls glowing faintly from the last burns of battle. Pieces of metal spun slowly, reflecting light like falling embers across the dark. The Deathworld fleet held its place for a moment longer, watching the battlefield as if making sure nothing still lived. Their formation was perfect, every ship aligned, every weapon still armed to the survivors below. It felt less like protection and more like judgment in the ruined bunker. Sarai stared through a cracked viewport. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her heart racing. "They did it," she whispered. Her voice was filled with disbelief, as though her mind still refused to accept what her eyes had seen. Captain Draw, leaning heavily on his dented sword, only nodded. "A whole empire's fleet destroyed in one night." His tone carried no joy, only respect, and a hint of fear. Sarai turned to him, her voice breaking. "Why? Why would they come for us? The council didn't care. No one cared. So why did they?" Drawl's tired eyes lifted toward the sky. "Because humans don't. Forget what it means to be left alone. They know what it means to cry for help and hear only silence." In the Galactic Council, that same silence was spreading. Reports from Vayara lit up every chamber. Images of human warships cutting through dreadnoughts played again and again on glowing screens. Every senator, every ruler, every diplomat sat, frozen, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. One counselor whispered, "If this is what they unleash for a single colony, what happens if they fight for themselves?" Another shivered. They would burn the stars. No one argued. For once, the chamber was unite in fear. Back in orbit, Admiral Reeves stood at the bridge of the Iron Requiem. Around him, his officers worked in silence, their faces lit by the dim glow of burning wreckage. "Casualty reports?" he asked. "Severe, sir," an officer replied. "We lost more ships than planned." Reeves' jaw tightened, but he did not flinch. "Record their names, every one of them." The officer nodded. Reeves' single quotes gaze turned to the stars, his voice low but firm. "And remind the galaxy they were Deathworlders. They fought knowing this was the cost." The order came quietly. "Withdraw." Engines roared back to life. The vast fleet shifted, turning slowly, aligning into formation once more. No victory speeches were given. No celebrations echoed through the decks. The Deathworlders simply left. One by one, the ships vanished into the black, swallowed by the void as though they had never been there. The flames of battle still glowed behind them, but the fleet carried no light of its own, only silence. On the surface, the survivors watched in awe as the warships slipped away. Children pointed with wide eyes. Parents held them close, whispering stories already forming in their minds. Sarai pressed her hands against the cracked glass, her voice trembling. "They saved us, and now they're gone." Drawl exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the last ship disappearing into the night. "They're not gone," he said. "They're waiting, somewhere in the dark, waiting until the next signal reaches them." And across the galaxy, that thought spread like wildfire. In the halls of empires, rulers whispered to their generals, "Do not provoke them." In pirate dens, raiders spoke in hushed tones, "Never target a colony that might call the Deathworlders." In the quiet hearts of oppressed people everywhere, a new kind of hope grew. If we cry out, maybe the humans will hear. But that hope carried fear as well. Because humanity had shown the galaxy something no one could unsee. They were not saviors. They were not conquerors. They were something older, colder, and far more dangerous. They were a species forged on a death world, carrying a fleet that answered distress not with mercy, but with fire. On Vayara, as the last glow of the fleet vanished, Sarai whispered one final thought to herself. Next time someone calls for help, who will they choose to save? The stars above gave no answer, only silence. And in that silence, the galaxy held its breath. Asterisk.